Okay, the feet are, first off, really dirty. There's ground in dirt there like, ooh. I'm going to try to scrape them out, and hopefully that works. Okay, that's not too bad. It's not too great either. Okay, preparing to do staining of the chair. Now I did 2 samples. This one is India ink, and this one is dark walnut stain. So I decided that I like the look of this one better, so we're going to stain the whole thing with India ink. Because I am staining it with the India ink, I'm not going to worry about some of the staining. If the staining shows through the stain, then I'll maybe have to worry about it, and I've learned an important lesson. However, for the moment, I don't think that any of this staining like that, I don't think that's going to show through the stain. So I think we'll not worry about it, and we'll just see how it looks after I stain everything. And if we have a problem, well, we can always do the work to get rid of the stain then. Okay, staining with India ink is pretty straightforward. We've got our wood that has all been sanded. It's all been scraped. It should be pretty much ready to go. I gave it a wipe with a damp cloth yesterday. It's all nice and dry now. So it should be dry and clean, and the stain should go on pretty easy and straightforward. So we just take our India ink and put some on our tampon, or I don't know what you want to call it. I call it a tampon. Now, I'm not going to stain the glue surfaces, even though, because India ink is lamp black, at least this is, vegetable lamp black, it won't affect hide glue. But out of an abundance of making sure that I get good glue joints, I am going to try to avoid staining the glue surfaces. So we just rub the stain over the surface, and any disaster areas will really pop up, but they can be addressed afterwards. Then, once we have the whole surface wiped with stain, we wipe it off. And there we wind up with not a bad stain coat. I've got a couple areas here which I'll have to do with a little brush. The grain of the wood is quite deep and open. It's very old wood. I messed that area up a little bit, but I can probably sand that off if need be. Okay, keeping it going. More ink. More staining. I'm hoping that I don't have too much eroded grain here. See, that shows why I chose this ink. Now, you can use a cloth tampon for staining. I'm a little short on cloth in my shop at the moment, having used it up or recycled most of it. So I'm using a paper towel. And the paper towel, because the wood isn't perfectly smooth, does erode some, but it should be good enough to provide us with a nice even staining. Well, I hope you can see how well that brings out the grain. Sure hope that shows up. Man, that is really nice. Really nice. Let's do some end grain. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. I like to daub the end grain in more than rub it. And then daub it off with a clean bit of the cloth until we get it even. If it's really uneven and there are lots of the deep grain is opened up, you can just use a brush, and the brush, the little bristles will poke in there and help to get that stain down in. There's the end grain. It doesn't show up as well. I might have to sand that back a little and see if I can get some grain to pop up in the end. Although this wood does not have very interesting end grain. You can also just apply your stain directly to the wood and rub it around. Oh yeah, look at that. Even that side grain is really pretty. A little bit of grain showing there. Okay. You can use two separate cloths for wiping up, too. You don't have to use the same one. That's especially nice if you're using cloth, because when your application tampon can be completely saturated and your wiping cloth can be pretty clean. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do all of these sticks, and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, I raided the house and got myself a rag. It's the old kitchen towel, tea towel, whatever you want to call it. I just tore it into a strip and rolled it up. Now I can use it as a spreader of stain. You can use it like that or the end or whatever. So, all right, before we can do the assembly, we need to do the mortises for the hinges. I'm going to put the hinges on after I've assembled everything and shellacked it. But I need to do the mortises before I do the shellacking. So, we'll do the mortises now. I got 4 brand new hinges. The old hinges were just in terrible condition, and they were not very good quality hinges to begin with. Same with the screws. All new screws. The old screws were all rusted out of use. So, and the heads were destroyed as well because they were the wrong screws for the job, and they had sanded them down so that the hinges would close. Not a great idea. Anyway, so we're going to lay out our hinges, and then we're going to cut the mortises. Okay, we're going to use the old location of the hinges to mount the new hinges. That way everything we know is going to line up. And these two screw holes match. Well, those two do too. Okay, so we'll use the inside ones to lay out our mortises. And there we just lay the hinge in the position in which it sits properly, with the sticks in the right position for fully opened, which is the layout of the chair when you're sitting in it. Okay, there's that one laid out. Okay, all nicely laid out. Now, there's a bunch of different methods we can use for doing our mortises for the hinges. I am going to use the tried and true marking knife. So I'm going to put my bevel of my marking knife towards the waist. So here we have our line, which is just outside the metal, and this part is the waist that's coming out. So I'm going to put my bevel towards there and then score these lines deeply. Deep enough for the chisel, or deep enough for the mortise to go in. Then I'm going to use a chisel to cut that out. Okay? So, and we just score the line repeatedly. This is where a shoulder knife would come in super handy, because then you would have that long knife and both hands on the knife, and you'd be able to make a good deep score, probably only 1 or 2 strokes instead of 5 or 6. Okay, is that deep enough? Don't worry about the ugly on the marking knife. That's glue from my last little jobby. It'll get cleaned up when I sharpen it. So when you're marking with the grain, you've got to be more careful, because the knife can follow the grain, especially once you apply pressure. Okay, hopefully that's better. A better light. Okay. Now, let's finish marking this last line. Okay. Then we move over to the next. And the next. Normally I would just put this on a bench like this and make my mark. But you can't see it that way. So I'm trying to hold it so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, that's one done. Now, I like to cut my mortises in vertically. I like to do them like this. Let's see if I can figure out how I can do that so I can show you. Okay, for chisel tapping, I use a Japanese hammer. This one is 300 grams. And I'm going to use a 1/2-inch chisel. I could use a much larger chisel, but yeah, no, that's me. Okay, so just a couple gentle taps. And I'm just using the depth of my marking knife cut here to cut my, and there you can see couple fibers in there right here did not get cut. We don't need a hammer. You can just do this by hand as well. I like tapping with the chisel. It gives me pretty good control. If you have good hands, mine are kind of shaky, so they're not the best. Okay, now we just flatten this out. Again, you could use a larger chisel. It will be more, it will provide you a better reference for the whole thing. Cleaning up the edge. This looks really awkward because it is. I'm just doing this so that you can see what we're doing. Now, you can use a larger chisel to make sure that that bottom is absolutely flat. I've done this a lot. So, there you go. That is going to sit in there just like that. I overdid it on this corner. I wandered out a bit because of that ripping fiber. However, there is our first mortise of 8. Okay, you don't have to use a marking knife. You can use a chisel. It's the same thing. You put the bevel of the chisel towards the waist, the smooth side of the chisel, the flat back, on your marking line or just inside of your marking line, because you can always trim that up later. Get it right. You can hear the difference when it hits the bottom of the bevel. That is to say, the bevel won't go in any deeper after that without major force. You can hear the difference in the sound of the chisel. Thwack, thwonk, buck, like that. Listen for it again. See? So you can definitely, if you listen, you can hear when your chisel is as deep as it's going to go with that move. So then you can come back. Sometimes when you come back, you can get a bit more. Yeah, a little bit more there. You can hear the first crack is like clack, and the second one is a boom. Like that. Okay, now we just have to chisel that out. I don't know if I can do this so that you can see it. Anyway, here we go. Again, I'm using the depth of the marking of the chisel mark to determine how much I take off. This doesn't really make a different sound, but you can feel when it starts to lift the wood, and you can see it if you're watching. This will now make a different sound as it gets closer to the vise. Okay, need to raise that up so the whole mortise is out of the vise. Trying to set this up for you to see is really awkward. Okay. Maybe there's a better demonstration setup. I'll work on that later. Yeah, okay. And I've left a little bit on both ends, just so that when I do come back and trim it up for perfection, we get nicer. The marking knife method is fast, but this method is much more precise. Again, it's the same deal. I'm keeping the bevel of my chisel to the waist. go. Okay. I'll finish those off and we'll catch you on the other side. Okay, here's how fast it is if I just do it without worrying about whether you can see it or not. Oops. And there it is. Smooth, level, done.